Go ahead.
Exactly. In the space of, what, was that a second and a half? The district communication committee meeting at 6:30 in the Triton High School library. We can go around and do a quick introduction, though I think everybody knows everybody at this point. I'm Narissa Wallen, Triton Regional School Committee.
Maureen Heffernan, Triton School Committee. Dina Sullivan, School Committee.
Peter Senzillo, Finance Committee.
Lawrence White, Raleigh Finance Committee Chairman.
Cliff Pierce, Raleigh Board of Selectmen.
Wilma McDonald, Salisbury Selectmen.
Raymond Condon, Salisbury.
You guys just make sure you're using your mics. Sorry to interrupt, but
They need to go again.
no, I don't think so. Bob seemed to think it was okay. They just need to.
Brian Forget, Superintendent, Triton.
Michelle Cresta, School Business Manager. And Sandy.
And Sandy.
Sandy.
All right, this meeting is being audio and video recorded, so we have quite a bit to go through tonight. So I'm going to let us go straight into the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we can head off from there. Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Last meeting was kindly held in Rowley, so thank you for hosting. The meeting notes of that meeting from February 28th are attached. We don't know an official approval of meeting notes, but if there are any comments or questions, this would be the time to raise them. All right. Seeing none. Separate from the agenda packet over on the table was a copy of the budget. Does anybody need a copy that doesn't have one? Okay. So I'm going to turn this over to the superintendent and the business manager to go through the budget, which was voted last Wednesday. Feels like 2 months ago. The 13th.
Yes, so we're not going to take the time to go through the entire document. Certainly there is narrative, and again, I'm not going to go through the whole narrative, but at the meeting last week, was that just last week? 2 weeks ago? Last week? When it was approved, we tried to focus folks' attention to that narrative as we're trying to tell the story that we believe our schools are good, but there are still significant needs. And while the towns have stepped up and continued to attempt to fund the needs are well beyond what the towns can support on their own. So I know Narissa and I will both be at the State House tomorrow, hopefully testifying, depending on how long the line is, for the education hearings. But this is certainly something that we cannot survive at this rate without input and help from the state. So other than that, and pointing folks to that again online if they wish to read it, or you have copies around the table, I'll have Michelle go through the numbers and we can certainly answer any questions that you might have. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. I believe earlier at a DCC meeting we went through the tentative budget. I know we did actually. I believe we were in Newbury at the time. Since that time, there were 3 minor changes to the budget that were actual decreases. On page 13 in our budget are all the changes from the current budget to the current year's budget to the now approved FY20 budget. But the last 3 lines on that page, line number 27, 28, and 29, are new since the tentative budget. We had a reduction in the Essex Regional Retirement Assessment of $11,187, a reduction in our data phone service of $990, and a reduction in the dental insurance estimate of $18,487. So the total operating increase for the FY20 budget is $1,690,394, or 4.14%. On the following page, page 14 of the budget book lists the current assessments with that approved budget. The operating budget is in the amount of $42,476,705, with the increase of the $1.6 million referred to a moment ago. And that equates to operating assessments for Newbury in the amount of $9,386,779. The assessment to Rowley in the amount of $10,547,555, and the assessment to Salisbury in the amount of $12,648,939, with the capital budget remaining the same as it was in the tentative budget of $1,636,094. And the assessments on the capital to Newbury in the amount of $126,369, assessment to Rowley in the amount of $141,951, and the assessment to Salisbury in the amount of $170,266. Are there any questions? Yes.
What's included in the capital assessment? Is that the stadium, or is it other things in addition to?
It is the stadium as well as the Triton campus, the project from 19 years ago, which is almost coming offline.
So the big decrease for Salisbury is the fact that Salisbury Elementary, the last payment is this fiscal year.
Right, so it's
Fiscal
coming
19.
off next year.
So I'll take one then, because I made those promises. Yep, absolutely. So that, 18,000, I think was the number.
Yeah, the certification actually went out yesterday. The FY 18 total was just over 14,000 in revenue, and the year before was just over 3,000. So we're almost up to 18,000 in total so far in revenue.
Yeah, so it hasn't, when we were talking about that, when we proposed this, I don't know how many years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when we began the discussions, it was, the hope was for 40,000 in revenue, and that would be put into an account that would maintain the stadium. If we made any more than 40,000, it would reduce the assessments. So hopefully we wanted to make more than that. At that point in time, we were one of many that were looking at developing fields, but there were not a plethora of fields. Now everyone has built their own fields, whether it's private clubs like Seacoast United or the Amesbury Sports Park, or all the schools now have their own turf fields. So the demand is not there. So that was bad forecasting on my part, not seeing that everyone else was going to be doing this as well. So I will take that hit every day. That was my problem. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right.
So can I just say one thing? So just the two moving parts that are, I would say, are always moving. So every year we deal with health. We deal with healthcare increases. So our premiums, well, I was going to say they rise or decrease. I can't remember the last time they decreased. So premiums rise. There are many within the Maya Trust that are getting decreases this year. So we are still at the table negotiating with our Public Employee Committee, which negotiates with all 5 unions collectively, not separately, and that's for healthcare for all the district, or all district employees. So that is still ongoing. We're hoping there's additional savings. We don't know that yet, so certainly there's not anything that can be assumed. The other piece that is the healthcare changes on an annual basis. Special education, as we continue to talk about, changes on a given day. It can change from week to week with students moving in, students being identified. So since we've finalized the budget, there are even changes, deltas plus a delta. So I just wanted to call this out that we in prior years, and I'm not going to remember exactly, but the last few years, we have not used excess and deficiency as a revenue in the budget, and that has been very purposeful. There were times when we had 700,000, 800,000, I don't think we have had more than 800,000 and change certified. But again, auditors recommend 3% of operating. It's capped at 5%. That is our only recourse if and when that student moves in, or if and when something catastrophic on the roof happens. Our hope is to build E&D so that we have that resource. Remember, we talked about this, I think 2 DCCs ago, where we dropped and we now have a lower Moody's rating. It's 2 lower than Rowley and Newbury and one lower than Salisbury. And that is strictly, noted in the report, was strictly, as well as our audit report that we have in draft form, specifically noting our lack of reserves. So that has been very purposeful, and I want to make sure we talk about that, because that wasn't in the budget last year, and it's not again this year as a revenue source, because that is the only vehicle we have as a resource if and when those catastrophic things happen. So just want to make sure we're having that discussion with the towns as well.
Any questions or comments on that? I think it's pretty straightforward, and I know you all deal with the same things, so. All right, moving on to the landlord-tenant agreement update. So there are two drafts that are in the packet. 3A is Newbury's draft that was reviewed by their town council, and 3B is Rowley's draft. I don't think they're identified beyond that, but I believe those are the two that we received by email that we went through. So I know Salisbury has met with Brian to kind of handle questions, and hopefully those have all been answered at this point. No, still waiting. Okay.
So as of right now, we met with Brian, was it last week, the week before, Brian? Recently.
February break, yeah.
And the questions were answered. There's still the language around one of the documents as far as looking at capital, the roof and things like that. We wanted to send back to our attorney to look at.
Okay.
And then the sense I have from the Salisbury Selectmen is that we will not be ready to make a decision probably anytime soon, which means it probably won't be ready to go to town meeting this year. We still have a little bit of pushback because, again, we're the biggest ones affected with owning with having to take on Salisbury. And we don't think that we'll be ready to make that decision before town meeting, before articles have to go in front of town meeting.
It would be helpful if you want to take Rowley's and Newbury's and provide that to council as a reference as far as what has been changed, at least, or at least recommended from Newbury and I think everyone, no, you don't use Tom Holland.
And,
I think
oh,
all
sorry,
three
go ahead.
towns are using different councils now, so that could be a good thing. Three different
Very
opinions.
different opinions.
Yep.
So if we can just go through real quick, I know I think there's only one or maybe two changes in Newbury's, just so that everyone's aware of what kind of where the requests are from the original document. I should have marked up the page. It is page 3 of 8, I believe, is their only change. It's under town responsibility. No, sorry. It's under Section 6, improvements, maintenance, additions, repairs, and replacements. Item B, procedure for emergency elementary repairs. So I know this is one that Rowley had actually marked up in theirs as well, just that concern about who gets notified, how much time is given during that notification process, that type of thing. So I'm assuming, because I believe there's strike-throughs in both of those, that's something that we're going to have to come back. I mean, it's something we can definitely discuss tonight, or it's something that we can come back to at a later date to try and find something that's going to be amenable to all the towns as far as that provision goes. So we can. Sorry, it's page 3 of 8. So you're in Annex 3A. Did you? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so we have to come up with something by way of notifications, because that's, that can be, I would see that could potentially be a bone of contention if there's some sort of catastrophic issue down the road. So if we can get that ironed out in the landlord tenant, that would be, ideal.
3A is Newbury's?
3A is Newbury's, yep. 3B is Rowley's. Yep.
Did we make any changes to that?
They struck out notification, but they struck out any member of the Board of Selectmen as far as the notification. So they have the district will provide written notification of the emergency to, and then they struck out member of the Board of Selectmen. And then within 3 hours of receiving notification, the town and they struck out any member of the Board of Selectmen, town administrator or designee was left in, shall acknowledge in writing the existence of the emergency and shall proceed with the repair.
I think the
And then-
intent probably is the district will provide a written notification of the emergency, period, and number one. And then I think the intent is they want it to go through the town administrator as the
Okay, yeah.
the funnel point.
Yep.
Which then, in Newbury, Tracy would then bring it to the selectmen.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to compare Rowley's on the same page as well, just to make that, contrast. They actually, the council actually recommended an entirely new paragraph that's in there under item B. So, and it provides for, it looks like, two-way communication so that if the town happens to notice the issue, or identify the issue rather than the district, that they can do the notifying as well. So I don't know. Again, this is where it gets a little hairy because it's definitely between the towns and the district. But obviously, we'd like all three towns to, be in some form of agreement on the direction to go in this. So I know that Salisbury is not ready to kind of declare language here yet. But if we had at least a direction to go in to work on this draft, that would be helpful.
Just to confirm, this is the lease. So step one is the agreement needs to be amended. Say that the district owns the middle school, high school, each town owns its own elementary. The only change there is Salisbury then owns its own elementary. And then the regional agreement would say, we'll govern that by a lease agreement. And then the lease agreement is signed between the committee and the boards of selectmen, not going through town meetings. So this simplifies it. But I think the regional agreement language is easy, right? If we agree, we're taking ownership. So then this is something that can be amended between the selectmen and the committee at any point in time. That's not the rigmarole of going through a town meeting process. So just to make sure that that's clear.
Yep.
That simplifies things. If we go for 1 year and then realize there's language that doesn't work, it can be brought up again, and we don't have to bring it through the regional agreement amendment process.
Absolutely. Yeah, much more easily amendable.
So if I can suggest, I know because Salisbury's not ready, but if Salisbury can provide this to council, I think this is two takes, right? This is two different ways of this still very much Newbury saying, like the original agreement or like the proposed lease says, it's we're notifying the town. Rowley's is taking much more of a whoever's the responsible party will notify the other party. We're going to keep everyone safe and we'll agree it without the timelines, which I understand that. There was a comment about the timelines being a concern, which then quickly concerns me with if it's it's a boiler and it's 5 degrees outside and we can't hold school for a week, that's a problem. But I understand that by the same token, we have to work with the town and their processes to get things happening. So I don't anticipate that any of the towns, whatever, hold things up to keep their kiddos out of school. But I'm not opposed to either of the languages, but I think it'd be helpful to get a third attorney's take on that.
Yeah. Is that something that Salisbury would be?
Right after we met, Neil was supposed to be sending it to the attorney. I mean, so to my knowledge, it's at the attorney, but, I mean, we talked a little bit about what some of our
Yep.
holdup is,
Yep.
what our thoughts are.
Yep.
But, I think the language is something that Neil was in the process of doing with
Okay.
the attorney. I don't think that,
I haven't heard back whether he got anything.
Okay. So I believe that was Newbury's only proposed change that I saw in theirs. So if you want to look at Annex 3B, which is the Rowley marked up draft, the bottom of page 1 looks like the first major change. It's actually primarily a rewording the way I'm reading it. So again, we can go back to council and get an opinion on that, but it's taking the information about the services of the janitor and moving it to the bottom of the page and then changing some of the way the terminology works, it looks like. So to me, that seems like a formality, but knowing that Newbury is not here, I don't know if Salisbury has any commentary on that paragraph. All right. Moving to the top of page 2. Striking during the term of this lease, and then adding in the utilities, the oil and the cable television, excuse me, both of which the district actually already covers. So that's something that's been traditionally paid for by the district, and we maintain all the contracts on that. So I don't know if there's any comments on that. Nope. Okay. Moving down to section 6. I'm not sure what this language does, so maybe that's, again, just something that, I don't know if Brian has any insight on this.
It's formalizing legal language. It doesn't change
Yeah.
the spirit at all. And then the edit in district responsibility is basically, that's a duplicate.
Yeah.
Because section 5 talks about utilities. So in my read, certainly take council's opinion, but in my read, that clarifies language. There's nothing substantive there.
Okay. Moving on to page 3, item, well, what is it? I guess it's 6D, or under the town responsibility. It's striking the utility costs, which I think goes to the same direction that Brian was going to. Moving on to section, I guess B it would be at the bottom of that page, procedure for emergency elementary school repairs. We just talked about that, so if we can take that back to Salisbury's council and see where they're at on that. Moving on to page 4, section 8, access to the premises. It adds the addition of both examinations and repairs, and then adds a provision about unlimited right of access to the premises in emergency, which I believe is just formalizing a process that's already there, as far as I know, because there's lock boxes and things like that that the safety departments all have access to.
We very much like that language.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know with the Pine Grove renovation, that has been something we've talked to about literally every single spot in the building. How do you get access? So again, if there's commentary from Salisbury on that, we can take that up down the road. But I believe that's kind of just formalizing the way it already is. Assigning and subletting references back to the lease, it looks like, and then strikes the languages to the except as otherwise authorized by law or the regional agreement. Do you have any insight on that, Cliff? That was one that I wasn't sure about why that was changed, because in all that we do, or a lot of our policies, it's always, unless it's, prohibited by law or that type of thing.
My insight is that these changes were made by our town council.
Okay. All right. Is that one maybe that you could get clarification on, just as to why the changes are, so that we can understand where, kind of the direction that he was intending to go in?
Well,
with
okay,
that?
just looking at this, the district may not, under any circumstances, assign this lease or sublease without mortgage or otherwise pledge or encumber any of the premises without the prior written approval of the Board of Selectmen. Isn't that, just looking at it, and this is the first time I've really focused on it.
Okay.
Doesn't that kind of go without saying?
I guess it does. I know. So I guess the thing that we've always been told by MASC when we're putting together all our documentation is that you always reference that if Mass General Law prohibits it or specifically allows it, you make a provision in there in case that's happening. And I guess maybe that Mass General Law would never do that, but.
Yeah, so you're saying that Mass General Law may allow this district to assign some rights in this building, in the Pine Grove School?
No
to someone
idea.
else? I don't think.
Mass General Law does a lot of things that I don't understand, or.
I think what our town council is saying here, that, hey, it's your building, and they can't affect the right to title to it. I think that.
I think that last statement was in there. If there was any other language in the regional agreement that said we could lease it out, it doesn't. My only concern would be we rent out the facilities, the stadium, all that. I think the way that Tom Mullen has edited this is talking about leasing or subleasing. We're not subletting the building out. We're renting for an afternoon. People are using space.
Right.
So I would say that goes into district coffers and it's used for district purposes. So I'm fine with the language because I think it just clarifies. This was, anyway, Tracy Blaze has even said it publicly several times. This was a traditional rental agreement, lease agreement, and it's been tweaked over time. It's used for Pentucket and all that. So I think it's just further refining the language to be clear. So I think it's very clear.
I'm confused on this. Can you give me, so using the Salisbury Elementary School, because you guys now have that leased out on Sundays. So what does that mean if you were using that in reference to this?
So I would say that's not leased out. That's not subletting. That's renting the space for.
So that's not falling under this. Okay.
If it does, I would have a concern because you should all have a concern because the buildings, I mean, these are rented off to clubs and performances and band competitions, and there's groups that come in and rent the space, the field, the turf. All the 3 elementary schools are rented out to organizations. I mean, not just rented off, but I mean, whenever there's a group that wants a building and a room, we say, sure, we have space available. They pay the custodial cost. As long as we agree that that's not what this is talking about. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll clarify that on our side just to make sure that that's not. Yep. Moving on to page 5 of 8 at the top. Looks like it's A under section 11 insurance. I don't read this as a big change, but I don't know. I defer to Brian on this one. I'm reading it as changing from one person to any single accident.
Talking about paragraph A?
Yep.
Yeah, I think pretty standard, $1 million individual, $3 million aggregate with a $2 million umbrella isn't that standard on all our policies? I mean, that's pretty standard. So with umbrella in the aggregate, you have $5 million in coverage. So I certainly don't have any problem with that. That's the way all our property and liability policies are written through Maya. And I'm pretty sure they write all 3 towns' policies. So my guess is they're the same. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to the bottom of page 5, under section 13, surplus equipment. It looks like just a slight change there. So the way I'm reading the original language, it was that if there's surplus equipment in the district, that it will be turned over to the Board of Selectmen so that the town departments can use them. But the selectmen, if it's not used, would be responsible for disposal. It looks like this changes it, the way I'm reading it, so that the district would be responsible should the Board of Selectmen decline to take on that surplus equipment. So, and this is, what's been done as part of the Pine Grove project,
Yeah,
I believe, extensively.
I think the reality is it's going to be rare that the town is buying equipment. So with the building project, that, Salisbury in 99, this project in 2000, Pine Grove School now in 2019, 20, when it finishes. No, it's going to finish in 19. Sorry, I didn't say that out loud. That's really the only time equipment is purchased, and then then the district, everything, again, down to the landlord tenant. If you can pick the building up and shake it, if it falls out, that's district property. If it sticks to the walls, that's the town's property. So I don't think that changes anything substantively, materially.
All right, and on the final page 6 of 8, because the other 2 are blank. Yep. Looks like it's changing bankruptcy to receivership and striking the arbitration clause. So.
Again, further clarifying that we can't go bankrupt, we would go into receivership. So I think that's.
All right. Any other commentary on this? Okay. So we'll clarify that the rental sublease or whatever, sublet clause, and of course run everything back through our council, and you...
I'll give this to Neil to give to our attorney.
Okay. And then maybe we can sit down in... Are you thinking... I hopefully we'll have something back from your attorney, even if it couldn't go on town meeting. Are you thinking that when we get to a DCC later this spring, we could potentially sit down and try and hash out some of the final language? Or are you thinking that town council isn't going to even have back to you by then? And sorry, can you grab a mic? Yeah. I apologize. Okay. Yep.
My thought bubble right now. So as I teach my kids. So I think it's a little bit more than town council, to be honest. We're also looking at the larger picture of the regional agreement, and that we are the biggest ones to take on. Yet there's, we have been pushing the other part of the regional agreement, and we have a town that won't come to the table. So I think there's a little bit of discussion that we are still thinking amongst ourselves.
Okay.
So,
And Brian was in.
I was going to say, so I've sat with each of the boards of selectmen, chatted with them. So we have the two provisions being an alternative assessment and this landlord-tenant ownership of the buildings. So Salisbury and Rowley are incredibly interested in an alternative assessment. Newbury and Rowley are interested in clarifying this language. So therefore, there's that, okay, so let's talk about the whole package scenario, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, I think the reality is, hopefully these all three towns have something that they're interested in to bring the whole discussion to the table.
So I think that was our thought. So I think it's a little bit bigger picture, Nerissa, than just going to the attorney. It's really, 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 I'll add another really, want to talk about the larger picture stuff. And we feel as though this part is the only thing that we have to try to
Yep.
If it even
something
is
happen.
negotiable,
Right.
it's the only thing we have to say, please come to the table so we can at least have discussions. And when
Yep.
no one comes to the table to have discussions, this is all we got to say, okay, then we're putting this off then.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, go ahead, Peter. Can you grab a mic, please?
So Brian, why is it then that the lease seems to trump the regional school district agreement? What's the logic behind that? Did you just basically explain that?
So yeah, it doesn't trump it. So what it is the current regional agreement says the district owns this campus, Middle High School, and Salisbury Elementary. Each town owns, Newbury and Rowley each own the elementary school. So that's what the current regional agreement says. What we're proposing for language in the regional agreement is keep owning, the district keeps owning the Middle High School, Rowley keeps owning Pine Grove, Newbury keeps owning NES. Salisbury takes over the ownership of Salisbury Elementary.
Okay.
So that's the only language change really. And then, along with that, and then say in the regional agreement, and that relationship shall be governed, I'm paraphrasing, by a lease agreement agreed between the selectmen and the school committee. That way, the lease agreement that was 6 pages that we were talking about,
Right.
that is then the governing document.
Okay.
Because we already said each town owns its own elementary. And then if we all want to make a change, we sit around the table, make the change. We don't have to bring it to a regional agreement, to the town meeting floor, to the commissioner back here before it's, literally an act of Congress to get that changed.
Okay, makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So I mean, this is the best I can do at this point, I guess, is to say that I will, before the next DCC meeting, call Newbury's Town Hall prior to their selectmen's meeting immediately before the DCC for next month, and I will impress upon them that I would hope that they would come rather than just sending emails and trying to check in with Alicia, which has been my go-to since she's the one who's the most responsive over there as far as letting me know who might be coming. And try to bring them to the table so that we can have that discussion to say we're not moving forward. Nothing's moving forward until we can all sit down and kind of hash this out. Because that's, I don't know, as the district representative, I think that's the best I can do as far as that goes. So hopefully we'll get some action on that. All right, any other commentary on landlord-tenant agreements? Now that we've covered them all. All right, so moving on to state advocacy update. So as Brian mentioned, he and I are going to the Joint Committee on Education public hearing on the Chapter 70 bills tomorrow. We're both bringing testimony to that. I know for sure, there are certain parts of the state that are busing in literally charter busloads of people to come testify. If it doesn't work that we can testify live, we'll be handing in our written testimony to go out to the committee. There's also the McCourty twins are coming to testify, along with, I believe,
So
two
disappointed in
other.
the Patriots.
Mhm, yeah, they're bringing the Patriots to testify in favor of these bills.
Mostly
Yep.
the Promise Act.
Mostly the Promise Act.
Yeah.
Really?
Blindly just saying, this is the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Don't agree with their beliefs and what they're trying to do. The Promise Act just doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off.
So
I just like the
anyway,
opportunity to rail on the Patriots.
Yeah, don't go there.
No comments about Robert Kraft.
Yeah.
so I was drafting up my testimony this afternoon, and I'll send copies of that around. It may change somewhat in between now and I'll give you a few more, Sandy, to go that way. Now and tomorrow, but I intend this to be kind of the meat of the what I say when it's my turn to speak, or this will be the written testimony that I turn in if there's a situation where I'm not speaking. And I know, Brian, did you bring a copy of yours too?
Yeah, I'm passing that around. Mine's a single page.
Okay.
Marissa's has that 17.
I have
page.
Much more detail.
Right.
That was Brian's idea, actually, so I cannot take credit for that.
Not at all. Yeah, no, and so, I mean, Narissa focuses on the Chapter 70 changes. As you can see, my focus is on my grave concern around the fact that everyone is just blindly believing with blind faith that any of these bills are solving the problem, and city councils are taking motions and moving resolutions, and school committees are moving resolutions, and state legislators are going around saying, this is the greatest thing, and they don't even understand the fact that it doesn't benefit. 40% of regions, I'm sorry, 40% and 60% of regions are literally completely hold harmless. So you have local city councils taking votes to support things with just complete misinformation. So that's my plea to the legislators, is just, we have one shot at this, because this is going to be ed reform. Slow down, take a breath, and make a rule for yourself to govern yourselves, and say that you will not take an action on anything without a full accounting of how any of those languages affects every single one of the 351 communities in this Commonwealth.
Wilma?
How is it decided who gets to speak and who doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
Is it like who gets there first?
Yep, pretty much. Yeah. So it actually starts at 10. They have an end time of 5 on there. I don't know what will happen if they have so many people ready to testify that it would go beyond 5. I've never, I mean, honestly, it's usually half a dozen people and the ones that I've seen that actually come from the public to speak. This is going to be a circus, I would say, compared to that.
And I was just going to add, this is a little different in that those are usually joint hearings on education.
Yep.
This is specifically, I mean, there's 4 bills. No one knows about the other 3 bills. It's on the education bill, so it's
Yeah.
the Promise Act that's bringing all the hype. So that's why I believe, yes, I think it's going to be a 4-ring circus, let alone a 3-ring.
And also, if people that aren't allowed to speak in written testimony,
Yep.
I don't want to be negative, but do you really think anybody's going to read this big file?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the hope is that they're going to read some, right? And you have to hope that it's yours. Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
I'm going to keep emailing them until they say, yes, I read it.
There you go. Good idea, Brian. Yes, Freeman.
You know, I think Brian just made a very significant point. There are people out there, and a lot of people, that think any change is a positive, and that's not necessarily true. If you really look at some of the changes, it doesn't help us at all in any way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say the other group that I work with, Support Mass Regional Schools, today we actually put out a listing based on a third-party report of which districts would be likely to still be in hold harmless after, if it was based on a 5-year implementation, and then kind of spelled out where the potential benefits would be in each bill for those organizations. And the number that have come back and said to me, I thought this was going to be really good for us, and I color-coded it so you can literally see that there's blue that would affect districts that are getting foundation aid, and there's a huge blue section in the bill, and then there's anybody who's in hold harmless gets one little brown line down the bottom, and that was it. And it was mind-boggling, I think, to a lot of them to find out. And they said, but this is supposed to be, ed reform. And I said, it is ed reform. It just doesn't affect us. So sorry, Freeman.
One more thing, Brian, just for the folks at home, could you briefly explain the hold harmless?
You want me to have a go at it? 'Cause
You do it more briefly than I do. You try brief.
So I know I need to get out my visual aids now. So so I actually have a terrific video that I'll send out that was also released this morning that goes through this. But here's the whole idea about it is that the foundation budget is based on each individual pupil in the district having a certain value. So it can have to do with their grade that they're in. It can have to do with whether they take English language learner resources and have essentially the state sets aside an additional amount of money for them. When you multiply all of those costs by the number of students that you have in your district, you get something called the foundation budget. The foundation budget, if you have an increase in students, is going up, of course, because you're multiplying by the number of students, so it's going up. And then your Chapter 70 is going to continue to go up. But when your enrollment goes down, your foundation budget tends to go down. The state says that you can't get less Chapter 70 this year than you got last year. So as your foundation budget is going down, they're looking at that kind of line of funding that's sitting above it. So your line of funding is going slightly up because you're getting minimum aid. Your foundation budget is going down. As they increase the foundation budget, you have to go from where your foundation budget is all the way up to where your funding is before you start to see any additional aid above that. And that's the problem, is that we are $4.2 million in what they call hold harmless, that difference between the foundation budget being down here because it's going down and our funding being way up here and going slightly up over time.
So just pause right there. So to interpret what Narissa just said, so that difference means that the formula, if the formula was funded without hold harmless, we would lose $4.2 million in Chapter 78.
Yep. Roughly half of what we received.
If the state's formula said we get what we should get.
And speaking to Representative Kelkos yesterday, he has a fear that they may eliminate hold harmless. Do you share that?
Well, I was just going to ask, is this a permanent thing, hold harmless, or is it just for a temporary period?
So it's not, my understanding is it's not in statute. They've basically agreed that, I'm sorry, they've held harmless, yes, that we have to keep, that we can't go backwards. But the minimum per pupil aid is a decision made every year. So
it has to be at least $20 per pupil.
Yeah,
but,
I'm sorry.
But where they set it above that is totally up to the budget making process.
And so that's where the governor is at 20. MASC just came out with a position paper today. I was happy to see they're calling for a minimum of 100. MASS has talked about a phase-in, 125, 150. But yeah, so all it has to be is the $20 we got this year, which equated to $46,600, $300.
But do you have a fear we could lose that?
I don't know. Do I have lots of fear? My biggest fear right now is misinformation. I will say that every single state agency now, from MMA to MASS to now MASC, has taken the position that everyone needs to win to some degree. The only way you can do that without taking the formula and starting from, not scratch, but significantly going into the mechanics of the formula, is to do the hold harmless aid. So if it's $100, that's significant for us. That's, $250,000.
Did they look at us getting an extra $46,000 a year as winning?
Yes, because they believe our costs should be going down. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is when they see our district going down, whatever we are, 80 students, I think, across the district this year. I mean, we know that you lost 2 students in 2nd grade at Salisbury Elementary, and you lost 3 students in 6th grade at Newbury Elementary. Those students aren't all coming out the same place. You're not able to eliminate any of your costs. But what they see is 80 students coming off the top, and to their thinking, that is 3 or 4 classrooms that should just be gone. And it's very difficult to get that across to state legislators who do not, who are basically urban-based, which there are a lot of them, for them to understand that those costs don't go away. The interesting thing I just found out the other day is that Boston, and I don't know if any of the other urbans do something called a weighted student funding to actually disperse their funding across the schools in their district, and they have exactly the same problem. So as one school starts to lose students, their weighted student funding goes down, and why the urban legislators can understand that but not apply that to the entire Chapter 70 formula, I mean, I didn't even realize it was happening. So now I'm going to be asking that question. Do you understand that this is exactly the same?
I think one of my concerns is the chair has said this before this committee is when she and I talked to the lieutenant governor last year and talked about our plight, the very, very first thing she said is, but your enrollment's going down.
Yes.
How can your costs be going up? You know, and if she doesn't get it, I'm not sure who does.
Yeah.
And I will say, it's, the more time has gone on, especially the last 6 months and talking to folks, it's literally, it's the North Shore, and then the entire western part of the state, and then the whole Cape as well. So I think as more and more are falling into this hold harmless, because the populations are declining and folks are aging in place, it's really, it's not just urban, but it's literally the Boston metro urban. And again, they have the most representation, they have the loudest voice, but I think that I have more hope now than I ever have before. Do I have a fear? Absolutely. I'm going to live in hope. Yeah.
You know, when
For
I
now.
talked to Representative Kelquist yesterday, he said the same thing that we all realize. He goes, in Boston, they think we're all super wealthy up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're all seen as Weston. I would say every single suburb, regardless of how rural it is, how urban it is, if it's not an urban, we're all Weston as far as they're concerned.
Yeah.
Do they ever look at, like, our free and reduced lunch should tell a better story than just how expensive our homes are down Salisbury Beach? I mean, last I knew Salisbury was like a 49% free and reduced lunch. I mean,
And these are state indicators. It's economically disadvantaged. They keep making new ways to report the data out. But the issue is it goes back to the state Chapter 70 formula is aggregate wealth. So it's the combined total wealth of a community. So Salisbury is literally the poster child where you have incredible equalized valuation because you're a beach community, you're a coastal community. You have some significant wealthy individuals in town who contribute to the aggregate wealth, but you have the second lowest per capita income in Essex County. So that right there, I mean, it literally is the poster child of why Chapter 70 formula as written doesn't work. And Neil and I sat with Roger Hatch, as we talked about, who was one of the founding fathers, who literally wrote the language with the legislature in the late 80s. And when we were talking, I said, you know, we have less dollars today. He said, well, it's not less dollars. And I showed him, I'm like, look at my graph. I carry it everywhere I go. I've given it to my kids. And he literally said, well, not really. And then he literally dug into his computer and he's like, well, I'll be darned. It really is. So, I mean, again, well-intended, the purpose and the vision and the hope was all there. But 26 years later, it just hasn't panned out and no one's taken a look at it.
You know, but that's to our point.
Yeah.
The more we hammer, the more information that gets out there, the better off we are, because people don't understand what you just said.
Yep, absolutely. Which is, I could, 72 pages of testimony, and I'm sure you get the cane, and that's where I arrived at. No, the thing that I need to say is just don't vote on anything without the numbers, because people are just blindly trusting. It's dangerous.
Bottom line is, where's the money going to come from? I mean, you have to
Use your mic, Peter.
Someone else, if you take it, rob Peter to pay Paul. I mean, the state. I mean, Baker's not in any appetite to raise any taxes or anything like that, and so we have.
Peter, can you grab your mic real quick just so that we can?
We have this
Thank you.
stalemate that I don't think is going to change anytime soon because, if you're going to be if you're going to say that North Shore deserves more, then somebody in Boston or some other district is not going to get the money. So, and the solution would be, to look for more ways to have, revenue, like maybe they need to have a slight increase in the state income tax. I don't see any other way that, I mean, they're not going to take money from another district to give it to our district and say, they need the money. Look at what their foundation's going down and all of that. I don't see that happening, really.
We should take all the gambling and all the marijuana money and put it towards education.
In theory, there's,
Can we just say that's really,
money is, yeah.
those three in the same sentence is disturbing. We'll take the money, but man, is that disturbing.
Well, it is.
It is, yeah.
Even, I say this all the time, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, if you thought you would balance a town budget on the sale of marijuana, people would think you were crazy.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
a source of revenue today that you cannot discount.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you're a drug dealer.
Yeah.
They would.
Yep. Yeah, I will say, I mean, I think those two conversations go hand in hand. Every time I've heard it brought up by a legislator, they're talking about this being new money, so it's not coming from elsewhere and going into education. It's literally has to be new money, and where does that come from? And I know I think it was Senator Lewis, who chairs the Senate Education Committee, is also reintroducing the millionaires tax that was declared unconstitutional for the ballot last year, or 2 years ago, I guess it was. But they're rephrasing it, and they believe they have a way that they could pass it potentially if they can get the votes. So I don't think there's any question that there needs to be funding towards education. Everyone seems to get that. They all seem to understand that it needs to be new revenue. They have some ideas on how to get there. What we need to do is work on the distribution of that. So, I mean, even the governor said, I think it was yesterday, I saw a quote from him that said, we need to wrap this up this legislative session. Education reform funding was the specific topic. We need to wrap that up this session. So I think there's a universal buy-in to getting this done. We just can't let it get done in the wrong way. So that's been part of the...
And that's powerful words to hear everyone saying we've got to get it done. I mean, for so long it's been kicking the can down the road. So it's a balance of saying, yes, we agree, just take your time.
Yeah. So that said, there's also in the agenda packet for today, there's a legislative letter. So periodically, the school committee will essentially send a letter to legislators, typically R5, but we sent beyond that before. We sent to, last year we sent to the chairs of Ways and Means. I think we sent to the chairs of the committees of education, that type of thing. This is the latest one. So Senator Tarr's office has been asking, we sent one in January that was specifically about the Promise Act, because that was the only thing that was out at that point. And then they've been saying, do you have a follow-up? We can get it to other legislators' offices, make sure that it gets attention. Can you get us something? So this was the draft of that. When I was talking about this with policy and advocacy the other night, the question came up of, can we send it as a big group rather than just from the school committee? Can this come from the towns as well to say, we're all bought in on this idea that this has to happen. It's a huge part of the town budgets. And this is a declaration not just from the school committee for the schools, but it's a declaration from our communities for the health of our communities overall. So I'm bringing that to you tonight to say, can we do that? Is there a way to do that? I don't know if the select boards are used to being able to sending letters like this. I don't know if you have done it in the past. Do you send them as boards? Have you done them as individuals? Is there a way that we can get this done to voice this as a community rather than as the school committee to our legislators about the schools specifically?
I know, Nora, so Wilma and I set the agenda with Neil yesterday, and what we had talked about, because I had sent it after you and I had gone back and forth in email, I had sent it out to all of the Salisbury selectmen and also Neil. So what we had talked about is that we don't need to take a vote to all sign it, but I can still read it in, like we have selectmen's report. So my intent is to read it and then say that we will be signing it as a board of selectmen in support of the letter. So that is what we decided to do in Salisbury.
Okay.
Well, so we have it on the Rowley.
Sorry, can you grab the mic?
Yeah. We have it on the agenda for Monday night, actually.
Okay.
So we're willing, we haven't talked about it yet, but I'm sure we'd be willing to help out in whichever way we can. So whether you think a joint letter is the way to go, or...
Yeah, I'm up to anything. I tried to, so this was originally written from the school committee, but I think it's equally applicable to come from the entire community.
Right.
But parallel letters would be great as well if you want to speak specifically to kind of the plight of the taxpayers and the town overall, I think that's, equally valid. It just needs to be kind of a united voice somehow, and I'm searching for that how to make that happen so that it's not just me drafting a letter, the school committee, working to all get us behind it, and then us sending that out to legislators. How do we make that more impactful so it's coming from the whole set of Triton communities, not just the school committee?
Right.
So, I mean, I'm open to input on that, and if that involves maybe changing language in the letter, that's fine. If it involves parallel letters and they all go together, that would be great. I know one of the things that Senator Tarr's aide had specifically asked about was his office taking and forwarding it on, so we could do, it can be a generic, dear legislator type of letter rather than to one particular legislator. In the past, we've typically made 5 copies and sent them to all of our 5 legislators, the 2 senators and the 3 representatives.
Can I make a suggestion? I think that what would make this most impactful is if the towns used this as a template and added on what the town's impact, what our budget impact is on the town's budget, because I think that might get their attention too. If they see that the towns have been supportive of our school district and what we try to do to educate our students in this district, but that there is a cost on the other side of the ledger for the towns as well, and that needs to be recognized too, and that there's got to be some fix. And the one way to fix that is to fix the education side.
I agree, Danny. Narissa just said that it's a major part of most towns' budget. In our town, and I think most of these towns, it's not a major part. It's approaching 50% of our town budget, and that is more than significant.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. So I'd look for insight from you as to kind of the direction we want to go to in that, and then I can communicate to Newbury and say, kind of, this is the direction that Rowley and Salisbury are going to. Per the DCC, we'd like you to do the same, because I don't often hear back from JR by email. So I'm going to have to find another way to communicate and get this across. Can you grab a mic? Sorry.
One of the other things you can mention is looking at the deficiency budgets and deficiency and say, see, how can we be so wealthy? Look at that. We have this $300,000 or something for a $40 million budget.
Yeah.
That speaks for itself, too.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So I like that idea of using this as kind of like the base format and then adding to how the lack of funding has impacted our town and in our budget. So I'm okay with doing that, with working with Neil. I'll read over the letter in the selectmen's meeting, because I didn't put it on as an agenda item, because I was just going to read it at the end, and then just we'll have like a discussion about adding to it, and then Neil and I can kind of add in, or Mr. Words over here can too.
Mr. Word.
Is Freeman your poet? I didn't know. Is that amenable, Cliff? And I don't want to leave out the finance committees either, because I think that's equally valid. I mean, as far as the in-depth budget review goes, you're definitely the group that's doing that piece as well. So I don't, as far as who it comes from, entirely up to the group. But I think the more the better, honestly, would be my opinion. Wilma?
Are you folks meeting with our finance committee next week?
So, yes, the invite was all 3 Salisbury reps, and all 3 are coming. So.
Yes.
There would be an opportunity to get them behind you.
Yeah.
They don't kill you.
I was going to say. Were you just cheering?
I know our advisory, and I know one particular fellow.
I wouldn't miss it.
Yeah, it's going to be.
Brian, you don't get paid enough.
All right. It was nice, actually. John Moak showed up at the Salisbury drop-in budget session and had really good input. So it was nice. John Moak.
Oh,
yeah.
He's definitely on board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is very, very different than who we're referencing, but
Fair enough.
It will take you 1 second to figure out exactly.
I can't wait to watch it on TV. So I'll come back to you, Cliff, and just say, do you want to add on? Is that the way you'd like to approach this, or
what
what's
do
your
you mean by add
preference?
on?
Well, I think what Ronnie had said was that she's intending to add kind of a town impact statement onto or into this letter and send separately, right, is your intention? So have the Salisbury Board of Selectmen kind of sign a personalized Salisbury Board of Selectmen letter, as it were. I don't know if that's the direction you want to go in, or and do a Rowley impact letter.
Yes, I guess that's the most appropriate way.
Okay, it's up to you. I mean,
So is this the letter you're going to sign? It's in the,
yeah, this is the one that, so I had folded, we had gone over this through policy and advocacy and then included it in the full school committee agenda packet. I have not had any feedback from the school committee aside from policy and advocacy. I folded all of policy and advocacy's tweaks into this as it exists today. So this is probably going to be the way it goes at this point for the school committee.
Who is it going to be addressed to?
We traditionally do our 5 legislators, so that would be the way that I would see it. We typically just have a copy of this in the office, and everybody comes in and signs, and it'll literally say down the bottom, sincerely, and then it'll have all of our names, and traditionally I think we put our towns on it as well. Everyone signs, and there'll be a copy for Representative Kalkors, Representative Hill, Representative Mira, Senator Tarr, and Senator DiZoglio. And then presumably if Senator Tarr at that point and his aides would take that and send that on elsewhere. I know they specifically wanted to forward it to Senator Lewis's office, who's the chair of the Senate Committee on Education, and Senator Chang Diaz's office, because she actually filed the Promise Act. That's what she's known for. She kind of owns that act.
But I think it really should be CC to the governor, Charlie Baker,
Yeah.
because he's so big on numbers. He's big on, well, the state has this, I don't forget what he says, how many millions of dollars in reserves, and and it would be shameful for him if he saw that schools were operating with, all these schools that are asking for money because they're not doing so well. It would be shameful for him to say, well, boy, this is not good news. I mean, we have these schools that are having, very lean, monies in reserve and stuff like that, and because he's always boastful about how much the state has right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that might,
Yeah.
should be, a little bit more aware.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. We didn't send to the governor this year with the Promise Act because I think it was a specific Senate bill at that point, but we had in the past, so that's definitely something that we can do. So, and there is a joint Ways and Means hearing that is also, I think it's April 2nd. Is that right, Brian? That's local aid and education, which would affect everything that kind of hits town budgets. So if that's something you want to testify at too, that's always a chance to get in front of them. The local aid and education specific one for by appointment testimony was last week. And I will say that Representative Kalkors, who now sits on House Ways and Means, specifically asked them the question, what about these towns, and the characterization of the comment or the question that he made was, it seems like he's asking, what about my town too? So it wasn't necessarily my town is in need, but it was a commentary on everybody should get something. That was the way it seemed to have been taken. So hopefully, as we continue to work with Representative Kalkors and he can kind of vocalize this a little bit better, that will come across better, and hopefully letters like this going to the governor could also drive that home.
I've said this before, but any time that you write to the governor, anytime you try to bring it to his attention, you have to nicely remind him that he was a selectman once, because I think that matters.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
In a wealthy town, it wasn't a,
Yeah.
district school, but he ought to at least have some empathy towards that.
One would hope. Exactly. Okay. So I think, the school committee will do this one. Yes, Bernie? Yeah. Sorry, can you grab a mic up here, please? One.
My view of politicians, rightly or wrongly, is that shorter is much better than long.
Mm-hmm.
And my concern with the letter as it's drafted up now is that everything in it is true, but how many people are actually going to read it? Some of the staff people may read it, but then you've got a Chinese whispers problem. So I think in Rowley, I would say we need to work on making it shorter and punchier and, you know, hit them right between the eyes as much as possible. Here, it's just too much. And so, you know, if you've got a PR person to look at it, to kind of tighten the whole thing up so that it's basically 3 paragraphs, not 5 paragraphs, 300 words, not 500 words, we're going to be it's going to have more of an impact. At the moment, it's just another piece of paper. And that's my concern. Again, I understand the intent. It's just what effect are we really going to have? So, I mean, we exist in a world of sound bites, and if we can come up with a sound bite, we're going to be better off. The perfect example of a sound bite that's misleading is the Promise Act. Well, it doesn't promise anything to us, but it's swayed the patriots, it's swayed a whole bunch of people who haven't looked at what it is, and you've got to counter that rather than simply complain about it. You've got to basically do an arms race on terms of upping the finding the rhetoric that's really going to have an impact.
All right. Thank you for your input. All right. Anything else on this? I'll get in touch with Newbury on it, and hopefully they can take it up at a meeting relatively soon and be able to draft something that will speak to their town's specific place in this. All right. I think that's it, right? Sorry, I lost my agenda in here somewhere. There it is. All right. Any other questions, comments, anything else you want to bring up? All right. I don't even need a motion to adjourn because it's not an official meeting. So thank you all for coming. The next one is April 25th. We'll be back in Salisbury Town Hall. So I don't think that's been reserved yet. Ronnie, can you see about reserving that for that night? All right. Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a good night. My agenda tomorrow.
Well, again, with all this new